Hello, and welcome to my channel, Reading Little Blue Books Out Loud. This is a little blue book. It is Little Blue Book number 678, and it is titled E. Haldeman Julius, The Man and His Work, written by John W. Gunn, and it is copyrighted, I believe, 1924. Let me look. Yep, 1924. Now this is part 3, so we're left off on the top of page 25, and I'll backtrack just a few sentences, and we'll get started. If Harris had done nothing but write his masterly biography of Oscar Wilde, his place in literature would be assured, declares Haldeman Julius. This is one of the few really great biographies in all literature. One of the most vivid and stirring scenes ever written is that of Harris. Walk in the Park with Wilde, when he tries to persuade Wilde to leave for France, to escape from the hostile, daily more threatening forces all about him. Harris has the flight completely arranged, and he shows Wilde clearly his true position. But Wilde is a beaten and broken man. He has lost the springs of action, and Harris' strong plea is unavailing. Here is a faithful, soul-stirring moment, a moment that reveals in an illuminating flash the very depth of character, and Harris has caught it forever, so that the generations of men may behold it with pity and wonder. Harris reaches a high point of thought in the discussion of love between him and Wilde. What a frank, lofty discussion of this subject! The one thing that I greatly dislike in the Wilde biography is the sordid description of the actual physical end of Wilde. Not that the end is ugly, but that it is pointless. We all come to that, but when all is said, Harris's book, out of all the books that have been written about Wilde, is the book that makes the man live for us. Harris is a great critic. His contemporary portraits are unique and valuable additions to our literature. The irony of it is that Harris's very service in giving us these fine portraits of the great men he has known should have brought him the unfriendly charge of egotism. Suppose he is egotistic. What does it matter? He does none great things. He has done great things. He is always interesting, at least in his role of critic and biographer. Contrary to Harris' opinion of himself, I regard him as a greater critic than storyteller. At his best, no one can excel him in talking of men and books. Another book by Harris that would alone be sufficient to guarantee his fame is The Man Shakespeare. What an achievement it was, after 300 years of voluminous writing about Shakespeare, that Harris should produce such an original, important study of the man. How intensely human he made Shakespeare! What a breath of passionate reality there is in this book! It is easier to give a man's opinion about particular things, to quote him definitely on this or that phase of life, than it is to say that he thinks of life as a whole. One studies the particulars within narrow and tangible limits, where certain things are agreed upon, and the unknowable is politely forgotten. But the moment one turns to the general, or to the abstract, it would be better to say, one is engulfed by immensity. It is only the man of hard and fixed dogma whose view of life can be put with ease and certitude. The one thing that can be surely said of the free-thinking mind is that it holds a minimum of certitude. If I say that Haldeman Julius is a skeptic, I have perhaps said little, but I have said nearly all that can be said. He has no lazy, simple view of life, rests himself upon no cheap, comforting illusions, but regards life candidly, as a thing of uncertain complexion and issue, a tremendous, treacherous riddle. For the sake of convenience, this earth has boundaries and paths that the sensible traveler may follow. But mist is under and mist above, and no man has ever penetrated this mist. Haldeman Julius is a sensible traveler through life. He follows the paths of work and play that beckon him most urgently, stays wisely within the boundaries of the knowable and the possible, and translates the life about him as solidly and significantly as he may into thought and deed. He is not indifferent to the mystery of life, as he is a sensitive and reflective being. This mystery colors his thoughts and heightens his feeling of the sublime, yet mocking, tragic yet comic, spectacle of life. It also sharpens his zest for life, fills him with a determination to play out this strange game for all that it is worth. He rarely talks of life in capitals. It is generally some aspect of life that he discusses, seeking to reduce the larger subject to an intelligible scale, to sense a little of the nature of the whole in the contemplation of a part. He sees life in fleeting impressionistic glimpses, in that partial vision which is eternity's only concession to the human intelligence. Thus I recall a brief, suggestive talk as we drove along the main concrete road out of Girard one Sunday morning in early spring. Haldeman Julius spoke of nature's indifference to the needs of man. These cultivated fields, these fences, this concrete road, so useful to man, so necessary to his comfortable civilized existence. What does nature care for them? He exclaimed. Let man's hands remain idle for a while, and observe how quickly nature will destroy all trace of his handiwork in a riot of weeds. Nature in thousands of years was so little regardful of man's needs that she did not give him a road, not even a simple trail. These splendid fields of wheat, that field of corn, are the products of man's deliberate effort, his bending of nature to his will. Nature left to herself produces weeds. This, I should think, would be the most hearty reflection on man's egotism. But no! Man must persuade himself that nature is working solely for him, that the whole scheme of nature was planned for him by some divine intelligence. He chooses the lesser role. Man's greatest pride should be that he has conquered the indifference of nature, that he has turned this rude, unfriendly planet into a habitable and gracious abode. Man is so far from being a god that he cannot enjoy the thought of his solitary creative triumph, but must hail God and nature as his friends and co-workers. He shrinks from his god-like isolation. He cannot bear to stand alone. Another time Haldeman Julius spoke of man's desire for a comforting formula. The average man wishes to be told that life is such and such a thing. He demands a brief, indefinite, plain terms that will at once soothe his fears and satisfy his curiosity. He is afraid to think. He prefers to let others do his thinking for him. Give him a ritual, and he is reassured. Periodically he mumbles the magic words, and all is well. He can go about his business with the eternal mystery safely tucked into his waistcoat pocket. But all is not quite well. Little doubts creep in. There is perhaps a terrifying glimpse of blackness, and then the formula must be repeated with a special fervor of affirmation. Few are brave enough to squarely confront the mystery of life, to accept the limitations of human knowledge, and to work manfully within these limitations. This is the key to Haldeman Julius's philosophy of life: to do one's work, to stick to one's purpose, according to the best opportunities of life. A sturdy acceptance of human limitations without any relaxation of human effort. It is idle to ask whether this effort will ultimately come to nothing in some far-off wreck of things. Within our field of vision, this effort bulks large in importance. Without this effort, life would be meaningless. A man's work is the vital thing, says Haldeman Julius, and if that work is creative, it will bring him to the deepest joy that life holds. While Haldeman Julius is not the man to pass by a single joy of life, or to overlook any interesting thing, his work is the chief and compelling interest of his days, and I might add, with not a little truth, of his nights, for he spends many evenings in his office, and one who is familiar with his habits will first seek him there. He loves the atmosphere of this great book plant. and the creative idea that it embodies, in the long shelves of little blue books, and all his spectacle of productive energy, he feels his most satisfactory hold upon the purpose of life as interpreted by man. Sitting at his desk, Haldeman Julius envisages the steady growth of the Little Blue Book series, a dramatic vision, 1,000 titles, 5,000 titles, 10,000 titles. Who can tell what the end will be? Who can set a limit to the possibilities of this eager life force? In talking of his work, and he is always ready to talk of it, Haldeman Julius puts emphasis upon his fluent nature. It is not fixed within any bounds, but is a thing of constant expansion and progression. When I began to issue the Little Blue Books, he told me people asked how far I intend to go. They found it hard to conceive of a product without definite limits. A building was always so many stories high, a road so many miles long, and the Little Blue Books, by analogy, must surely be limited in number. Now that the series is well past the 500 mark, people realize that the Little Blue Books do not represent a work of today only, and of a certain number of titles, but a work of the future and of endless possibilities. The work is as boundless as the need for it, as boundless as culture itself. If I say that Haldeman Julius's work is always close to the surface of his thoughts, when it is not actually uppermost in them, I do not mean to convey the impression of remarkable or superhuman concentration. The fact is that his work is so immense and so interesting, so varied and picturesque in its suggestiveness, and so richly human, that I can't imagine him forgetting it absolutely in his waking moments. It is quite natural, too, as the Little Blue Books afford so many great contacts with life, that they should appear in the background of most discussions. I know that within Haldeman Julius, in whatever direction the talk runs, it is interwoven with this or that phrase of the Little Blue Books. A stream of manuscripts comes to his desk. Hardly a day passes that he does not receive a pile of new manuscripts, and having carefully read them, a task that he puts first, he is full of enthusiastic talk about them. I always look forward to a meeting with Haldeman Julius with this in mind as much as anything else. There is a thrill to this familiar touching of the source of new ideas. In this glimpse of the first stages of a book's career, this is all the more fascinating when one reflects that these are not books that will find their way only into select groups here and there, but little books that will circulate by the millions, that will meet many minds in their long and useful journey. Haldeman Julius's immediate working environment is very simple: a small office in one corner of the large plant, a business-like desk and typewriter, a filing cabinet, and a dozen shelves of books. He works quickly with a nervous energy. There are many details of his work which will at once suggest themselves to those who are familiar with the direction of an extensive business, that I shall not attempt to describe. The fact is, I don't understand them, and they rather frighten me. The editorship of the Little Blue Books is something that I understand better. This means, of course, continual planning of new titles, as well as keeping a firm grasp on the general purpose of the series. There is always a great deal of correspondence with the writers of the Little Blue Books, the suggestion of new ideas, the weighing of subjects, the critical examination of manuscripts. As a rule, each writer will have work assigned to him for months ahead, and Haldeman Julius must keep the threads of all this work in his hands. Then each manuscript must be carefully read and edited before it is sent to the printer. And there is the final scrutiny of the proofs before the book is released for the press. The relations of Haldeman Julius with his writers are of the finest and most agreeable kind. There is no dictation of subjects or viewpoint. One rule to which Haldeman Julius very continuously adheres to is that a writer shall be given only those subjects which he can approach not simply with interest, but in a spirit of enthusiasm. He knows that if a man writes about something that does not fully engage his interest, the result will be an uninteresting book. Haldeman Julius studies the peculiar bent of each writer. discovers his special capabilities, and always assigns his work with a view of getting the best from each writer. Although Haldeman Julius is full of suggestions, quite often a writer will suggest a subject that appeals to him, and he will be told to proceed with it. As a relief from the editorial supervision of the little blue books, and the thousand and one other details of life in a lively publishing plant, Haldeman Julius collaborates with Marcent, his brilliant and charming wife, in the writing of short stories for the Atlantic Monthly. And I'll take a drink. Getting a little cotton mouth. Pardon me. Home is at the edge of town, a simple two-story frame building with one of those long, generous fronts, from whose windows a peaceful farm landscape can be seen. This is Haldeman Julius's escape from life's alarms and annoyances, or rather the library and den serves this delightful purpose. It is this library, which apologies to Marcet's little theatre, that chiefly interests me. I could bury myself in it for days on end. I remember Haldeman Julius told me shortly after this den of books was a thing joyously complete, that he planned to spend a great deal of his time and do a great deal of his work in this sanctuary. But alas for human resolutions, he can't keep away from the office. This library is a long, noble room for the second floor, on the second floor, of course, with books, 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 filling all the walls. Haldeman Julius has the largest private library that I have been privileged to see, and what a magnificently representative and vital collection of books. The world of literature is here before you, and it will be strange if any book you mention is not found ready to hand. Here Haldeman Julius spends the greater part of his leisure time, talking, smoking, reading, and playing his favorite game of chess. He must be a skilled chess player, as he plays with such profound and opaque thoughtfulness. Speaking of chess, I am reminded of Haldeman Julius's peculiar faculty, one that should be very useful in chess, of retiring within himself, excluding anything and anybody that disconcerts him. I have never known anyone else who could so completely shut himself in and lock the doors of his mind against all intruders, even the most friendly intruders. There was a time when this habit of Haldeman Julius gave me a feeling of uneasiness. I was very self-conscious, and I felt keenly this mental desertion of me to my face, this going off alone with his thoughts. But then I reflected that he had a right to go off by himself. Haldeman Julius is not one of those fellows of hearty sociability, who are "hail fellow, well met" with everybody, who, as they go down the street, scattering great greetings right and left, seem to have just returned to town after a long absence. He is friendly with a winning manner, and all who meet him like him, but he loves a good measure of solitude and is intimate only with interesting people. And I think I'll stop there. We are at the end of chapter 1, and we'll go into part 2 in continuing part 4. Part 2 of the book. Part 4 of the reading. Alright, everybody, thanks for listening, and I'll see you in part 4.